You cried at a commercial once. Not a sad one, just a dog running to its owner. And you felt the tears before you even understood why. And then came the familiar shame. You looked around to see if anyone noticed. You pressed your lips together. You told yourself, not again, not here. Maybe it happens in meetings when someone raises their voice and suddenly your eyes sting before your brain catches up. Maybe it happens in conversations where you feel misunderstood and the tears arrive like an uninvited confession. Maybe it happens when you hear a song that has nothing to do with your life, and yet somehow it has everything to do with your life. And for years, you have been told the same thing. You are too sensitive. You need to toughen up. Stop wearing your heart on your sleeve. This video exists to tell you something different. Something that neuroscience, psychology, and some of the greatest minds in human history have confirmed. What they called weakness is actually one of the most sophisticated emotional systems a human being can possess. But before we get there, we need to be honest. Because this video is not going to tell you that everything is fine. It is not going to hand you a compliment and send you on your way. Because the truth about people who cry easily is more complex and more powerful than any simple reassurance. There are two kinds of people who cry easily. The first kind cries because they feel everything, and they have never been taught what to do with that. The second kind cries because they feel everything, and they have learned to let it move through them like weather. From the outside, both look identical, but on the inside, they live in completely different worlds. The poet Khalil Gibran wrote in The Prophet, "The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain." He was not writing poetry for the comfort of the crowd. He was describing something precise, something that science would spend decades trying to measure. The question this video is going to answer is not, why do you cry so easily? It is, what does it mean that you do? Here is where it usually starts. You were a child who felt things deeply. You cried when the movie character lost someone, even when you had never experienced loss yourself. You cried when someone was kind to you unexpectedly, which is the one that always confused people the most. And the adults around you had a response to all of this. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Or, quieter, more damaging, you are being dramatic. Dr. Elaine Aron, the research psychologist who first documented what she called the highly sensitive person in her landmark book, The Highly Sensitive Person, found that approximately 15 to 20% of the population are born with a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional information more deeply than others. Not more dramatically, not more weakly, more deeply. They notice what others miss. They feel what others skim past. They carry conversations home with them and replay them at 2 in the morning, wondering if they said the wrong thing. And when those children were told their sensitivity was a problem, they believed it. They learned to apologize for their tears, to cry in bathrooms, to laugh immediately after they cried so no one would see how much something actually landed, to preface their emotions with, "Sorry, I cry at everything," as if their depth required a disclaimer. They have been apologizing for the way they love for their entire lives.
But here is what nobody told them in that bathroom. In 2011, biochemist Dr. William Frey, who spent years studying emotional tears at a dedicated research lab, discovered something remarkable. Emotional tears are chemically different from the tears your eyes produce when you chop an onion. Emotional tears contain stress hormones, specifically leucine and enkephalin, an endorphin, adrenocorticotropic hormone, a stress marker, and prolactin, the same hormone linked to emotional processing and deep empathic response. In plain language, your body is not breaking down when you cry. It is cleaning house. The people who cry easily are not drowning in their emotions. Their bodies have simply become very efficient at flushing stress before it calcifies, before it becomes the kind of tension that Dr. Gabor Mate spent decades documenting in his patients, the tension that the body eventually stops being able to hold and starts to become. A 2014 study published in the journal Motivation and Emotion found that after crying, 88% of participants reported a significant improvement in mood, but only when they had social support present or felt safe in their environment. The tears were not the problem. The shame around the tears was. And the neuroscience goes further. Research from the University of California found that people with higher emotional sensitivity show greater mirror neuron activation, the system in the brain responsible for empathy, for feeling what another person feels as if it were happening to you. You do not just witness someone's pain, you experience it. That is not a malfunction. That is the neurological foundation of every great teacher, every healer, every artist, every person who has ever made another human being feel truly, completely seen. Let's talk about what the world has lost by teaching sensitive people to be ashamed. In her research on vulnerability, Brené Brown found that the people who reported the greatest sense of belonging, the ones who felt the most connected to others, shared one defining characteristic. They were willing to be seen, not armored, not performing. Seen. The people who cry easily are not doing connection wrong. They're doing it at a level most people spend years trying to get back to after decades of building walls and calling it maturity. Charles Dickens, who wept openly while writing the death of Little Nell in the old curiosity shop and reportedly couldn't finish the chapter without stopping, once said that he believed the capacity for tears was one of the marks of a truly alive human being. His readers wept with him, not because they were weak, because he had reached something in them that most writing never touches. Charles Lincoln, one of the most studied leaders in American history, cried in public, often, on funerals of soldiers he had never met, on letters written by mothers who had lost sons, on music played in empty rooms. The generals who served under him did not call it weakness. They called it the reason they trusted him. Now, the part of this video that requires courage to hear. Not all tears come from depth. Some tears come from exhaustion, from a nervous system that was never given the tools to process what it receives. If you cry frequently and afterward feel worse, drained, embarrassed, more anxious than before, that's a signal worth listening to. Not because something is wrong with your sensitivity, but because sensitivity without regulation is a river without banks. It floods everything. Dr. Daniel Siegel, the clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA and author of Mindsight, describes emotional regulation not as suppression, but as the ability to feel fully without being swept away by what you feel. He calls it integration, the capacity to hold emotion and awareness in the same hand at the same time. People who have built this, and many of the most sensitive people on earth have, through years of learning themselves, do not cry less. They cry cleanly. They cry and come back to themselves. They feel and do not disappear inside the feeling. They are moved without being capsized. So, the honest question, and sit with this one, are your tears moving through you, or are they moving you?
There is a word that people who cry easily are rarely given: strength. Not despite their tears, because of what the tears represent. It takes more courage to remain open in a world that rewards armor. It takes more strength to keep feeling when every cultural message tells you that feeling is inefficient. It takes a particular kind of quiet bravery to sit across from someone in pain and not immediately try to fix it or leave, but to stay in it with them. Maya Angelou, who survived more than most humans are asked to endure, wrote in I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings about the way tenderness persisted in her when the world gave her every reason to harden. She did not present softness as naive. She presented it as the most disciplined choice a human being can make when they understand what the alternative costs. Sensitivity is not the absence of strength, It is strength that chose to stay open when closing would have been so much easier. So where does this leave you? If you cry at music, you are hearing something most people have learned to block out, the frequency of human longing embedded in a chord, the way a melody can carry a memory that has no words. If you cry when someone is kind to you, you are responding to something rare, and somewhere inside you, some part of you knows how rare it is. If you cry in frustration, your body is telling you that what is happening matters to you, and things that matter are worth being moved by. The psychologist Paul Ekman, who spent 40 years mapping the human face and its expressions across cultures, found that tears are one of the only emotional signals that are universally recognized as genuine across every culture on Earth. You cannot fully fake a tear. Your body produces it only when something real breaks the surface. Your tears are proof of contact, proof that life is actually reaching you. In a world increasingly built for numbness, for scrolling past suffering, for skimming the surface of human experience, the person who still cries is the person who has not yet agreed to feel less. And that refusal is not weakness. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are not someone who needs to be fixed or toughened or taught to feel less. You are someone whose nervous system never agreed to go numb in a world that was actively pushing the anesthesia. That took something. Maybe you did not choose it. Maybe you tried very hard to stop it, but you are still here, still feeling, still moved by the things that deserve to move people. Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage." The thing you have been taught to see as your greatest liability, the tears, the depth, the feeling of everything at full volume, might be the most human thing about you. The world needs more people who cry at dog commercials, more people who feel the weight of a stranger's grief, more people who cannot listen to a beautiful piece of music without something rising in their chest. Because those are the people who notice, who care, who stay. Stop apologizing for the way you feel. Start understanding what it means that you do. If this reached something in you, leave a comment below. Not for me, for the next person who watches this mid-cry in a bathroom somewhere, pressing their lips together, telling themselves, "Not again." Tell them they are not alone. They never were.